I didn't plan on spending Christmas in Vermont. It just happened. My ex had the cabin booked months ago. One of those dreamy Airbnb spots tucked away in the mountains, stone fireplace, a hot tub under the stars, pine trees for miles. The kind of place couples go to feel like they're in a snow globe. We were supposed to spend the holidays there together, no family, no awkward small talk, just us. That was before I walked in on him stretching with his personal trainer. Anyway, I didn't cancel the trip. Maybe I should have. But by the time I remembered the booking, the refund window had already passed. And the idea of sitting in my apartment on Christmas Day eating takeout in sweatpants sounded bleak. So I said screw it. I'd go by myself. Read a book, make a stiff drink, and pretend I wasn't bitter as hell. I didn't expect Noah to come with me. I barely knew him, honestly. We worked in the same office. He was in accounting, I was in design. We'd sat near each other for over a year, had lunch together a handful of times. He was the kind of guy who wore flannel shirts and beat-up Vans, always had something sarcastic to say, and somehow never looked tired even during 9 a.m. meetings. The invitation happened by accident. I was venting about the cabin to someone at the office holiday party when he walked up behind me and overheard. "You're seriously going alone?" he asked, raising one eyebrow. I shrugged. "What, you offering?" He paused, then took a sip of his beer. "I mean, I might be." I laughed at first. But then I looked at him. He didn't look like he was joking. "You don't have family plans?" I asked. "Parents are in Florida, brother's stuck in Denver. I was going to heat up a frozen pot pie and fall asleep to Die Hard." I stared at him. He stared back. "You're serious," I said. He grinned. "Dead serious." 2 days later, we were in my car, driving through snow-covered back roads in Vermont, trying to find a radio station that wasn't playing Mariah Carey on loop. The cabin was just as beautiful as the pictures. Cozy and warm, with soft blankets, wood-paneled walls, and the faint smell of cinnamon in the air. Someone had left a tiny fake tree lit up in the corner, and there was even a wreath on the door. We unloaded the car in near silence, both of us a little unsure of how this was supposed to go. Inside, Noah dropped his bag by the couch and turned slowly in a circle, taking everything in. "Okay," he said. "Not bad for your breakup hideaway," I snorted. "Yeah, well, you're kind of ruining the sad, lonely vibe I had planned." He looked over his shoulder, deadpan. "I can go sit in the snow if it helps." That made me laugh. The first real laugh I'd had in weeks. We made dinner together that night, just pasta and garlic bread, and drank cheap wine on the floor by the fireplace. The TV stayed off. We talked, really talked, about work, family, bad dates. At some point, Noah asked me how long it had been since I'd been on a real vacation, and I realized I couldn't even remember. Later, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the trees. Somewhere down the hall, I heard Noah laugh softly at something. Maybe a podcast, maybe nothing at all. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone humming, badly, through the walls. "Noah." I pulled on a hoodie and padded out into the kitchen. He was standing barefoot by the stove, hair messy, sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes like it was something he did every morning. The sight was weirdly intimate. "Morning," he said, without turning around. "You like blueberries or chocolate chips?" I didn't know this came with breakfast service." He finally glanced back at me. "It doesn't. You just got lucky." I grabbed a mug and poured myself coffee, leaning against the counter. "What time did you wake up?" He shrugged. 6:30, I think. I forgot how quiet it gets out here. No sirens, no drunk people arguing in the alley. It's freaky. I smiled into my cup. "You're not wrong. We ate breakfast on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching snow fall over the trees. It was one of those perfectly still mornings where every sound is muffled, like the world's holding its breath. And for a moment, we didn't say anything. We just sat there, drinking coffee, soaking in the cold and the quiet and the weird, low-key piece of it all. That's when he said it. You know, this would have been a hell of a romantic trip. I looked at him. He didn't say it like he was trying to tease me. It sounded more like a fact, just something that was objectively true. Yeah, I said. That was kind of the point, I guess. He looked back at me then, and there was something in his face I hadn't noticed before. Not pity, not curiosity, just softness. Sorry he didn't show up for it, he said. That one hit. I swallowed, looked away. Honestly, I think it worked out better this way. I don't even know why I said that. Maybe because it felt true, even though I hadn't realized it until the words came out. Maybe because sitting there with Noah, with the snow falling around us, something about the whole moment felt oddly perfect. That afternoon, we took a walk through the woods behind the cabin. There was a narrow trail that looped around a frozen lake, and everything was so white and quiet, it almost felt fake. Noah kept pretending to lose his balance, grabbing my arm and yelling, "Man down," every time he slipped. Which, to be fair, was often. I started keeping count. By fall number 4, we were both laughing so hard we had to stop walking. At one point, we ended up on this little wooden bridge overlooking the lake. He leaned on the railing, cheeks pink from the cold, breath clouding the air in front of him. "You know what's weird?" he said. I turned to him. "What?" "This is probably the best Christmas I've had in years." I didn't answer right away. Because, yeah, same. And for a second, he just looked at me, longer than usual. Not with that casual friendliness he usually had. It was different this time. Like he was seeing me in a way he hadn't before. Or maybe I was just finally seeing him. The snow started falling harder. He shook his head, smiling. "All right," he said, pushing off the railing. "Race you back." Before I could protest, he took off down the trail, slipping immediately and yelling, "Shit!" as he caught himself. I didn't run after him. I just stood there for a second longer, heart thudding in my chest for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. Because that look he gave me, it wasn't just friendly, and I think he knew it too. That night, after dinner and a few glasses of wine, we ended up on the couch watching one of those painfully bad Christmas movies. The kind where a big city lawyer falls in love with a tree farmer or some crap like that. The fire was going strong. The lights on the little fake tree blinked lazily in the corner, and Noah had draped a fleece blanket over both of us without asking. I didn't protest. At some point, he shifted closer, stretching his legs across the coffee table. His socked foot brushed against mine under the blanket, just lightly, and he didn't move it. Neither did I. "Okay, but this guy," he said, gesturing to the screen. "He literally just met her, like 2 days ago, and now he's proposing?" "It's Christmas," I said, trying not to look at him. "Logic doesn't apply." Apparently neither do background checks or basic communication skills. I snorted. "You're really tearing into this." He leaned his head back against the couch cushion, facing me now. "I just don't get it. Like, love at first sight? That's not real, right?" I shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes I think we recognize people faster than we realize. Like we've known them in a different way, in another context." He didn't say anything for a second. Then, quietly, "You ever feel that about someone?" I hesitated. My throat felt suddenly tight. "Yeah," I said. "Once." He looked at me. Just looked. Long and steady. The TV played on in the background, but it felt like the room had gone silent. The space between us had shrunk without me noticing, and now our arms were almost touching. "You know," he said, voice low, "I used to think you were kind of a mystery." I laughed softly. "Because I kept to myself?" "No. Because I couldn't tell if you were holding back or just didn't see me." His words landed heavy. Not in a bad way. In a way that made me feel cracked open a little. "I saw you," I said. "I just wasn't sure if you saw me." His gaze dropped to my mouth for a second. And then, like some cliche from the same movie we were mocking, he leaned in. It wasn't a dramatic kiss. It was soft. Curious. Like he was asking a question and I was the answer. His hand found my knee under the blanket, just resting there, warm and solid. My heart beat so loud I could hear it in my ears. When he pulled back, he didn't say anything at first. He just smiled. Not the smirky grin I was used to. This one was smaller. Real. Okay, he said. So that happened. I laughed, breathless. Yeah. That happened. He looked like he was about to say more, but then he yawned. I should probably go to bed before I fall asleep on you. Yeah, same, I said, even though I didn't want to move. He stood up, stretched, scratched the back of his neck, then glanced over his shoulder at me. You comin'? That one word. The way he said it, casual, but just a little unsure, hit me square in the chest. I stood up, heart pounding. And I followed him. I didn't expect us to end up in the same bed. It wasn't planned. He didn't say anything like, come sleep with me, and I didn't make a move like I knew what I was doing. It just kind of happened. We both brushed our teeth in silence, taking turns at the tiny sink. We both shuffled down the hallway, not saying much, just exchanging glances that felt like sentences. And when he paused outside his room and looked at me again, I just followed. He pulled back the comforter and climbed into the bed like it was the most natural thing in the world. I hesitated for half a second before slipping in beside him. The room was dark, quiet except for the wind brushing against the windows. The only light came from the soft glow of the Christmas tree down the hall, leaking through the cracked door. We didn't touch it first, just lay there, barely breathing, as if we might scare the moment away. The bed wasn't big, but it was big enough that we could have kept our distance. We didn't. After a few minutes, he rolled toward me. I didn't plan this, he whispered. I know, but I'm not sorry. I turned to face him. Our noses were maybe 6 inches apart. Me neither, I said. Then his hand found mine under the blanket. Just fingers, barely interlaced. It was simple. It was slow. It was enough. I don't know how long we lay like that. Long enough for the silence to stop feeling heavy. Long enough for the sound of his breathing to become the most grounding thing in the world. I didn't sleep right away. Not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to miss it. The feeling of being close to someone. Really close. For the first time in too long. The warmth of his body next to mine. The quiet safety of it. At some point in the night, we shifted again. I woke up with my forehead against his shoulder, his arm loosely draped around my waist. His skin was warm. He smelled like laundry and cedarwood soap. It should have felt weird. It didn't. It felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, I expected it to be awkward. I expected him to pull away, crack a joke, go back to being just Noah from accounting. He didn't. We stayed in bed until late morning, dozing in and out of sleep, stealing lazy glances, smiling like idiots. When we finally got up, he followed me into the kitchen, grabbed 2 mugs, and poured the coffee like it was just another day. But it wasn't just another day. Everything felt different. Better. There were no big declarations, no, what does this mean, conversations. Just little things, like the way he bumped my shoulder when I handed him toast, or how he stood a little closer when we looked out the window together. The snow was still falling. It felt like time had slowed down, just for us. Later that day, we bundled up and walked into the small town a mile down the road. The streets were dusted with snow, and strings of white lights crisscrossed between old brick buildings. Everything smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. It was quiet, like everyone was still curled up at home with their families. We wandered into a little bookstore/cafe that was somehow both warm and freezing at the same time. I bought us 2 hot chocolates, and Noah picked up a used copy of Catcher in the Rye like it was a new release. He flipped through the pages as we sat by the window. I always forget how much this book annoyed me the first time I read it. You still bought it. I like to be annoyed sometimes, he said, smiling behind his mug. We talked about everything and nothing. The terrible Christmas music playing overhead, the weirdness of holidays after breakups, how small towns all seem to have one over-decorated inn that looks like a Hallmark set. Then he got quiet. I looked up. What? He shook his head, biting his lip. Nothing. Just, I don't know. This is nice. It is. No, he said, looking at me. I mean, like, really nice. I didn't think it would be. I knew what he meant. I felt it too. It wasn't just a good trip or a decent distraction. There was something more, something that hadn't been there before, or maybe had been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to show up. I wanted to say something, ask what this meant, where it was going, but I didn't. I just reached across the table, brushed my thumb over his knuckles, and said, same. That night, we cooked dinner together again. Something about the way we moved around each other felt different now. Like we were synced, like we'd done it 100 times before. At one point, I was chopping onions, and he came up behind me to grab something from the drawer, and his hand brushed the small of my back. On purpose. He didn't say anything, just stayed there for a second longer than necessary. I turned, half expecting him to step back. He didn't. And before I could stop myself, I leaned in and kissed him again. It wasn't urgent or messy, just soft, lingering, a little deeper than the night before. Like we were saying something we didn't know how to put into words yet. When we pulled apart, he just looked at me for a beat. Then, I'm gonna burn the garlic bread, I laughed. He grinned and went to save it from the oven, like nothing had changed, even though everything had. After dinner, we curled up on the couch again. This time, there was no buffer of half a foot between us. He laid his head on my shoulder, and I rested mine against his. He fell asleep like that, his hand still holding mine, breath slow and even. And I just sat there, holding him, listening to the fire crackle, letting it be exactly what it was. The next morning, we woke up to a blizzard. Not the soft, pretty kind either. The kind that turns roads into ghost trails and makes even phone service a gamble. I opened the curtains in the kitchen and just stood there, watching the thick white swirls erase the world outside. Noah walked in behind me, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes. Whoa, we're not going anywhere today. He leaned in beside me, shoulder to shoulder. Good. We didn't get dressed for hours, just stayed in sweatpants, alternating between the couch and the kitchen, drinking coffee, grazing on leftovers, talking about everything. Our jobs, past relationships, things we regretted, things we were still figuring out. Around noon, the power flickered. Then it went out completely. The heat was still working, thankfully. Some kind of old propane setup that didn't rely on the grid, but we lost Wi-Fi, lights, everything else. For a few minutes, we just sat there in the silence, looking at each other. Well, I said, this feels very... The universe is trying to tell us something. He raised an eyebrow. Yeah? What's it saying? I shrugged, trying to play it off. Something about how I should have packed more snacks. Noah smirked, but his eyes were softer than usual. I think it's saying, stay here, don't move. I didn't respond right away, because, yeah, that's what it felt like. Like the world outside had frozen over just to keep us in this little bubble a bit longer. He shifted closer, our knees touching now. You know, he said, I wasn't just being nice when I offered to come. I wanted to. Really wanted to. I looked at him. Why? He didn't look away. Because I like being around you, and part of me hoped this might happen, or something like this. That hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't let myself think about what this would look like outside the cabin, or how much I'd started to want that thought. I wasn't sure, I admitted. Back in the office, you were always hard to read. He laughed. That's because I didn't want to screw it up. You were the one person I liked talking to more than anyone else. Still are. That shut me up. I just looked at him, heart hammering stupidly in my chest. Then I reached for his hand. And we just sat there, fingers laced, while the storm raged on outside. That night, we lit candles everywhere. On the counter, on the mantle, in the hallway. The whole cabin flickered with soft amber light, and everything felt impossibly still. We made soup on the stovetop, shared a blanket on the floor, and watched the snow stack up outside the window like it was building us a wall from the rest of the world. Later, Lying in bed again, he rolled onto his side and looked at me through the candlelight. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah. Do you think this ends when we go back?" I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't want it to. And I didn't want to lie. "No," I said eventually. "I don't want it to." He exhaled, visibly relieved. "Good," he whispered. "Me neither." The storm lasted 2 full days. By the time the roads cleared, the trip was almost over. On our last morning at the cabin, I woke up early, earlier than Noah. I padded into the kitchen and made coffee in the semi-darkness, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered woods in slow pink light. It was stupidly beautiful. Quiet in a way I knew would be hard to find again once we got back. Noah walked in a few minutes later, hair a mess, wrapped in the same hoodie he'd been wearing for days. He yawned, rubbed his eyes, and smiled when he saw me. "Hey." "Hey," I said. We didn't talk much that morning. It wasn't a bad silence. Just one that said everything we didn't quite know how to say yet. We cleaned up the cabin together, packed our bags, folded the blankets we'd lived under. The place looked emptier by the minute. On the drive back to Boston, it felt like the spell was starting to wear off. Not in a bad way, just in that way where the world starts to speed up again, and you're not sure if the quiet was real or just borrowed time. About halfway through the drive, Noah broke the silence. "So, what now?" I glanced at him. "I was just wondering the same thing." He looked out the window. "I don't want to go back to pretending this didn't happen." I nodded. "Neither do I." He shifted in his seat, turned toward me a little. "I've never really done this before. Been with a guy, I mean. I don't even know what I'm doing." I smiled. "You're doing fine," he laughed. "You sure?" "I'm still here." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since we left the cabin. "Okay." We stopped at a rest stop, grabbed some food, and sat in the car for a while before getting back on the road. He leaned over while I was scrolling my phone and kissed me, right there in the parking lot. No build-up, no crowd, just us. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt big, like a door opening. Back in the city, things were different. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would have noticed. But we started seeing each other outside of work. Dinners, lazy weekends, late nights where he'd come over and we'd fall asleep halfway through a movie. He started texting me in the mornings, even if he'd just seen me the night before. We didn't rush anything. We didn't even call it anything for a while. But he kept showing up, and I kept letting him in. A month after we got back, he showed up at my apartment with a little cardboard box. "I brought something," he said, smiling nervously. I opened the box. Inside was a snow globe, a tiny cabin, 2 little figures inside, sitting by a window. I laughed. "Dude!" He looked embarrassed. "Cheesy. I know. But it was the only one that looked like the place." I shook my head. "It's perfect." We sat on the couch, watching it snow inside the glass, and he leaned his head on my shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "that week was supposed to just be a break from everything." "Yeah. But it kind of turned into something else, didn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, it did." He turned to look at me, eyes soft. I'm glad I said yes. "Me too." And that was it. We didn't need a label or a plan. We just had that one Christmas. And somehow, it was enough to start something real. Exactly 1 year later, we went back. Same cabin. Same crooked driveway. Same little town with the twinkling lights and cinnamon-scented air. The only difference this time was us. We weren't guessing anymore. We weren't tiptoeing around feelings. We were together. It had been a quiet, steady kind of year. Not perfect. Real life never is. But good. Surprisingly good. Noah moved into my place in June. He still left beard trimmings in the sink and stole all the blankets. But I started to miss it when he was gone. We fell into our rhythm. Sunday morning coffee runs, Tuesday night dinners at the Thai place down the street. I'd still catch him looking at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, Same way he looked at me that morning in the cabin a year ago. And I'd look back, not saying anything, because some things don't need words. That Christmas, we didn't pack much. Just sweaters, boots, the snow globe he'd given me, and a few gifts. We didn't need much else. When we got to the cabin, everything was exactly the same. The creaky floorboards, the smell of pine and wood smoke, the little fake tree in the corner. He walked in, looked around, and turned to me with a smile. Home sweet, almost breakup getaway. I laughed. Romantic, as always. That night, after dinner and wine and an absolutely ridiculous game of Scrabble, where he made up half his words, we sat by the fire. He pulled out a small box and handed it to me. Inside was a key. "I figured it's time you had one," he said. "To our place, you know, officially." I looked at him. "You sure?" He nodded. "I was sure the minute you didn't kick me out for snoring in your bed last January." I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a dramatic kiss, just quiet, familiar. The kind that feels like putting your hands in your favorite coat pocket and finding something you thought you lost. Afterward, we sat there in silence, just holding each other, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, snow started falling. Inside, we stayed warm. Together.